She smoothed the front of her navy blazer as she stepped inside, expecting a quiet send-off or maybe a handshake from the board. After all, tomorrow was supposed to be her final day after 29 years. She'd even brought cupcakes for the IT staff. Retirement was just one sunrise away, but waiting inside was Colt Merriman, the 36-year-old CEO with a Silicon Valley smile and a paper in his hand. He didn't offer her a seat. He didn't even say good morning, just held out the letter and said, "This is effective immediately. Your role has been dissolved due to strategic restructuring." Vera's hand hovered before she took the letter, glancing over it once. Her name, her title, her termination date, today. She blinked. No protest, no raised voice, just a single question, quiet and steady. "That's final?" Colt nodded, avoiding her eyes. "We appreciate your service, Vera." "No, you don't," she thought. "You just didn't want to pay the $2.1 million pension I earned." Colt was all numbers, all image, new logos, fast hires, a marketing campaign about agility. He never once asked how the bank's infrastructure ran, never cared to learn that Vera was the one who had built the system that processed nearly $19 billion daily. Vera looked at the letter one more time, then tucked it into her leather folder. Her breath caught in her throat, but she didn't let it show. She simply walked to the exit, at the door. She paused. Her badge hovered near the scanner. Beep. The light blinked green for the last time. She didn't look back. No dramatic exit. No final words. Just the quiet hum of fluorescent lights and the soft click of her shoes down the hallway she'd walked for nearly 3 decades, and somewhere in the code base of the system she architected. Something silent began to shift. The morning after her termination. Vera Linnell sat alone at her kitchen table, stirring her coffee long after it had gone cold. Sunlight filtered through the window, casting soft shadows across her notebook, leather-bound, worn at the edges, pages filled with the original sketches of a system that now powered one of the largest financial institutions in the country. It had no official name back then, just blocks, roots, security shells, and the handwritten notes of someone who'd stayed late long after everyone else had left. She had built it from the ground up. The infrastructure, the fail-safes, the encrypted core, all of it was hers. Not legally, perhaps, but spiritually, functionally. The system didn't just run because she coded it. It ran because it trusted her. She remembered the moment that trust was tested. 15 years ago. Vera uncovered anomalies buried deep in the transaction logs, quiet signals that pointed to internal money laundering. When she brought her findings to the executive board, they thanked her, and then promptly buried the issue. Within a week, she found herself uninvited to strategy meetings, reassigned from oversight roles, and branded as difficult to work with. That was the first time she realized they wanted her to build, not to question, but she never stopped questioning. Years later, the board asked her to approve a set of quarterly reports riddled with inflated asset values. A harmless touch-up, they'd said. One signature was all they needed. It would have secured a foundation scholarship for her daughter, Ivy League, full ride. But Vera declined. And just like that, the offer vanished. Her daughter went to a state school instead. Taking on student debt, Vera would spend years helping her pay off. Ethics had a cost. Vera paid it, quietly, painfully, but without regret. It was during that season she created Code Hera, a contingency, a choice, not a threat. If she was allowed to retire peacefully, the system would transition as designed. But if she was forcibly removed, the system would protect itself. It was never meant to be a weapon. It was a boundary, a final line of integrity written in code. Vera never told anyone about it, not because she feared consequences, but because she believed people would do the right thing when it mattered most. But Colt Merriman hadn't read the blueprint. None of them had. Now, the system had begun to hum differently, quietly, but unmistakably. A shift, a slow tightening, a silent defense. Vera didn't smile. She didn't cheer. She only looked out the window and said to no one, "I warned them. Ethics matter in architecture." Colt Merriman was the kind of leader who knew how to smile for the quarterly report. 36. Clean jawline, designer cufflinks, raised on a cocktail of investor pitches and TED Talks. The press loved him. Visionary. Agile. Disruptor. He called meetings, fireside sinks, and referred to staff layoffs as energy pivots. Sires. Internally. He presented Vera Linnell as the cornerstone of Gentry's digital legacy. At last year's anniversary gala, he handed her a commemorative plaque and called her a true architect of trust. 3 weeks later, he referred to her as the relic in a Slack message to his deputy CTO. She wasn't meant to see it, but she did. She didn't say a word. She just saved the screenshot. Vera knew exactly what Colt was doing. He wanted to clear space. Space for his people. Space for credit. The architecture she'd spent decades refining was no longer an asset. It was an obstacle, a system too complex for shortcuts, too ethical for manipulation. So he dressed it up. Every technical meeting became a performance. With Colt standing at the head of the table, like a host on a streaming pitch show, he brought in his innovation leads, young, eager hires with smooth speech patterns and LinkedIn resumes, but no deep system knowledge. Vera was reduced to watching from the second row of meetings she used to lead. When she raised concerns about rushed code deployments, he'd nod politely and move on. "We'll circle back on that." Vera. They never did. The most bitter moment came during the annual compliance review. Vera had submitted a report titled Ethical Exit Protocols, a preliminary security framework. Inside it, a detailed section outlining HERA and its purpose. She'd flagged it for executive review. Colt didn't read it. The document tracker logged 0 activity. When she followed up, his assistant replied with a one-line email, "We've decided not to prioritize legacy protocol reviews at this time." Legacy. That word landed like a slap. Vera wasn't asking to be worshipped. But after 29 years of holding the digital weight of the company on her back, she'd expected to be treated as something more than a loose wire to be snipped. She never yelled, she never retaliated, but the anger settled in her chest like a stone. Cold. Quiet. Unmovable. He didn't just fire her, he erased her, and he wouldn't know until it was too late, that she had left a warning inside the very system he dismissed. At 9:01 a.m., exactly 29 minutes after Vera Linnell scanned her badge and walked out of the building for the last time, the first alert appeared on the system's dashboard in Gentry Bank's Florida branch. Transaction authentication failed. Node FL07. Error code 8102. At first, it looked like a local network hiccup. The on-site IT tech ran diagnostics, rebooted the server rack, then tried again. The same error returned. Core validation loop not recognized. Within 5 minutes, similar pings surfaced across Miami, Tampa, and Tallahassee. ATMs flashed authorization timeout on their screens. Mobile transfers stalled mid-process. Clients started refreshing their apps. Some tried again. Others called. In the central IT control room at headquarters, a junior technician flagged the issue and escalated it to Tier 2 support. By 9:12 a.m., the Tier 2 team attempted to access the root authentication system to review the real-time gateway logs. Access denied. Insufficient credentials. They tried again, using the backup admin key issued by Colt's office. Still denied. Signature mismatch. The lead systems engineer, Janelle, stared at the blinking red bar. "That's not right," she muttered. "We've used this key for 3 quarters straight." Colt, just stepping into his office with a fresh coffee and a phone full of unchecked messages, was paged to the control room. "What's going on?" he asked, voice still relaxed. Janelle looked up from the monitor. We're getting ID handshake failures across 3 states, and we can't override them. The system's asking for something called— She hesitated. HERA signature root. Colt blinked. HERA? She nodded slowly. Does that mean anything to you? He didn't answer. Try pulling up the system design documents, he ordered. Janelle's team opened the archive, but the master documentation file returned unreadable, encrypted. She tapped a few keys, trying to bypass the lock. A message surfaced. Document secured by V. Linnell. Last modified, May 14th, 2014. No one's touched this file in a decade, she whispered. They stared at the screen. The more they tried to move through the layers, the more access walls they hit. All of them traced back to Vera. Her ID, her digital signature, her long-since-retired admin protocols. By 9:26 a.m., 7 more branches reported identical system glitches. Colt's phone buzzed. Incoming call. Treasury Compliance Desk. He didn't answer. Not yet. For the first time that morning, Colt Merriman's jaw tensed. This wasn't a bug. It was a lock they no longer had the key to. And the one person who did had walked out exactly 29 minutes ago. By 9:47 a.m., the glitch had turned into a blackout. From Boston to San Diego, ATM screens across the Gentry Bank network froze simultaneously, each displaying the same bold, impersonal message. Service unavailable. Please contact your branch. Only, the branches weren't answering either. Inside the bank's mobile app, user login requests spun endlessly before timing out. Wire transfers halted mid-transaction. Pending mortgage approvals were suspended. Internal dashboards returned incomplete data. Authentication systems stopped responding altogether. At 10:04 a.m., crowds began forming outside branches in Florida and Ohio. Local news stations picked up the story. Gentry system down nationwide. Hashtags began trending. Social media flooded with confusion, complaints, and unease. Some asked if it was a cyber attack. Others feared a liquidity crisis. Some just wanted to know if they could pay their rent today. In Gentry's 17th floor boardroom, Colt Merriman stood with both hands pressed flat on the glass conference table, eyes scanning the live report feed. "Tell me this is temporary," he said sharply. Janelle, now leading the crisis call, didn't answer immediately. "The system hasn't just failed, Colt," she finally said. "It's rejecting every override we've thrown at it. This is intentional behavior. It's protocol-driven." He exhaled slowly. "So we're locked out?" "At the root level, yes." Colt turned to the company's general counsel, who had joined the emergency meeting via video call. "Reach out to Vera Linnell, now. Offer reinstatement. Offer a bonus. I don't care. Just get her to unlock this." The legal team nodded and made the call. At 10:21 a.m., they got an answer, not from Vera, but from the HR director's assistant. "We can't authorize any communication regarding internal systems. Ms. Linnell is no longer an employee of Gentry Bank Corp. Her credentials have been formally revoked. She no longer has access, nor permission to engage." They tried again, this time from Colt's direct office line. No answer. He paced the boardroom, teeth clenched. "They don't get it," he muttered. "She wants control. That's what this is. She's making a point." Janelle shook her head. "I don't think she's making anything. She just left. And the system did exactly what she designed it to do." Colt looked out the window, down at the street below, where camera crews were arriving outside the corporate tower. The system was offline. But the bank? The bank was very much online, under the spotlight, under fire, and underprepared. And the one woman who could stop the unraveling? They had let her go, just 49 minutes ago, by 11:05 a.m. The boardroom no longer echoed with commands, it buzzed with anxiety. Half-finished coffees went cold. Collars were loosened. And Colt Merriman had finally stopped pacing. He stood still, silent, staring at the contract draft just printed on the table in front of him. Reinstatement, retroactive employment, immediate compensation package, double her original retirement amount. If we offer this to Vera now, she signs. We bring her back on paper, Colt said, forcing calm into his voice. Once she's technically re-employed, she can override the lock. No one disagreed. Everyone wanted to believe it was that simple. One mistake, one fix, a price to pay, but still salvageable. The bank's legal team expedited the process. The contract was updated, reviewed, notarized, and sent out via secure email with a couriered physical copy as backup. By 11:31 a.m., Vera received it. She was sitting in her living room, barefoot, with a cup of peppermint tea in hand. The world outside her window was loud, stock tickers crashing, phone lines vibrating, news headlines screaming. But inside, everything was quiet. She opened the file, skimmed the language, and read every line twice. Her name was there. So was her title, her compensation, her welcome back. It even carried Colt's digital signature. Then came the knock. The courier with the same contract in hard copy, hand-delivered. She thanked him softly, then called the number listed on the final page. Colt answered himself. Vera, thank you for calling. Look, we understand things weren't handled well this morning, but this contract restores everything. Just sign it. We'll set the override. We'll make this right. Vera was quiet for a long moment. Then she said it. I can't sign this. What? Why not? Because it's invalid. What are you talking about? It's legal. It's signed. It's not about legality, Colt. It's about timing. HERA isn't just a lock. It's a condition. It only responds to an override initiated by an active, authorized employee. At the moment of activation, she paused. I was fired at 8:32 a.m. You terminated that authorization. Colt's voice cracked. But if we bring you back, you can't bring me back to a moment that's already passed. He didn't respond. I warned you, she said quietly. In the white paper, in the protocol notes. But no one read them. Vera hung up. She didn't slam the phone. She didn't cry. She just sat back in her chair, closed her eyes, and whispered, This isn't revenge. It's architecture. And miles away, in a glass tower with blinking screens and desperate faces, Colt Merriman finally realized what no dollar figure could undo. They had lost the key when they let go of the hands that built the lock. By 12:18 p.m., it was no longer a disruption. It was a full-blown collapse. Over 84% of Gentry Bank's front-end digital services were offline. Teller interfaces showed looping authentication errors. ATM networks remained frozen. Internal operations had slowed to a crawl as staff attempted to process transactions manually, something many hadn't done in years. And then came the first market tremor. At 12:23 p.m., Gentry Bank Corp stock dipped below the $100 line for the first time in over 8 years. It didn't stop. Within 15 minutes, the stock was down 18.4%, triggering an emergency halt on the trading floor. Colt Merriman was in his office when the CFO walked in, pale-faced and whispering, We've lost over $3.2 billion in market cap in under an hour. Colt barely heard him. He was staring at a digital display, watching the red arrows drop beside the bank's name. Below the screen, a small line of text blinked over and over. Core control override. Request denied. Architect verification failed. Every attempt to reverse HERA had been rejected. They had tried cloned access keys, biometric forgeries, even an emergency override script Vera had authored herself 5 years ago, but none of it worked. HERA was live, untouchable, because even Vera could no longer override it. She doesn't have employee status, Janelle reminded Colt flatly. Her digital clearance was revoked at 8:32 a.m., Hera doesn't recognize her anymore. It's a closed door. Then break it down, Colt snapped. Janelle looked exhausted. We can't. The root of the system runs on Vera's original logic layer, and we can't see half the architecture without her private keys. Then rebuild it, he barked. From scratch. Silence. A younger engineer, Devon, shifted nervously and cleared his throat. We've been running that scenario. To recreate her system from the ground up. Clean code, new verification layers, secure testing environments. We're looking at 6 to 8 months minimum, and that's, conservatively. Colt froze. How much? Ballpark? 400 to 500 million. No one moved. Then, at 12:51 p.m., a private call was placed to the chairman of the board. By 1:04 p.m., Colt was summoned to a secure boardroom on the top floor. 7 of 9 directors were already present, faces drawn, voices clipped. The head of the audit committee opened the conversation without pleasantries. Mr. Merriman, this board is initiating a formal inquiry into executive negligence, reckless termination of critical personnel, and resulting financial damage to shareholders. Until further notice, your decision-making powers are suspended. Colt opened his mouth. But nothing came out. No defense, no spin, no strategy, just the cold thud of consequence. Because the truth was undeniable now. This wasn't a system glitch. This was the collapse of a structure with no architect left to guide it. And the irony cut deeper than any headline ever would. They had fired the one person who knew how the foundation worked. Now they were watching it crumble, from the top down, at 2:05 p.m., while media headlines screamed about stock plunges and banking collapse. Vera Linnell quietly logged into a private email account she hadn't used in years. The address was clean, encrypted, and linked to no employer. She opened a blank message. Subject line: Public clarification from Vera Linnell, Gentry System Events. She wrote with no anger, no bitterness, only clarity. To all concerned parties and system stakeholders, I would like to state, for the record, that I have not tampered with, sabotaged, or otherwise interfered with Gentry Bank Corp's systems since my termination earlier today. The protocol currently running is one I authored over a decade ago, a passive contingency titled HERA, embedded solely to protect the integrity of the bank's digital infrastructure. Its only trigger is the unethical removal of its original architect prior to a confirmed retirement transition. Once triggered, it secures the system from unauthorized succession. It is not an attack. It is not malware. It is, quite literally, the system choosing not to trust those who violated the ethical contract it was built upon. I do not wish harm to the institution. I only withdrew the one thing I truly owned. My trust. She paused, then attached a single document, a PDF copy of an email, dated June 17, 2015, addressed to Gentry's former board. If we ever reach a point where our systems outpace our ethics, I will have failed in my duty as an architect. I have written a safeguard, not for myself, but for the integrity of the structure. Should this board ever choose speed over stewardship, you will not need to worry about retaliation. The system will simply stop listening. Vera hit send. By 2:16 p.m., the statement had reached 3 internal mailing lists at Gentry and leaked to a prominent cybersecurity forum. By 2:37 p.m., it had been picked up by financial tech blogs, then tweeted by 2 former Gentry engineers with the caption, "She warned them. They laughed." The system remembered. Younger developers began posting Vera's quote across threads and feeds. I only withdrew the one thing I truly owned. My trust. It spread fast. Not as a scandal, but as a quiet kind of anthem. Some called her a whistleblower, others, a systems prophet. But Vera didn't respond to interviews. She didn't appear on camera. She simply closed the laptop, stepped outside onto her back porch, and watched the sky change color. Inside her home, the world buzzed with speculation. Stock analysts, former colleagues, digital rights advocates, all weighing in. But Vera wasn't chasing justice anymore. She had built it into the blueprint. They had ignored the warning, fired the architect, and triggered the defense she designed not out of vengeance, but out of principle. Now, the system was doing what she had always done, standing silently, holding the line, waiting for the right people to return. By 3:42 p.m., Gentry Bancorp was no longer experiencing a systems outage. It was facing a crisis of trust, and trust is harder to reboot than code. Customers had waited in lines for hours, watched helplessly as digital transfers failed, and grown anxious as local news reports confirmed the issue was not due to external attack, but an internal safeguard malfunction. That phrasing, internal safeguard, ignited something. By 4:00 p.m., social media sentiment had shifted. What had begun as anger toward a glitchy bank was turning into doubt in its leadership. And when Vera Linnell's quiet statement began circulating among consumer advocacy circles, the shift became an exodus. If their own architect didn't trust them, one viral post read, "Why should we?" At 4:25 p.m., Gentry's competitor, Apex Federal, launched a customer onboarding campaign titled, "Stability You Can See, Systems You Can Trust." By 5:00 p.m., 42% of Gentry's premier clients had initiated account closures or asset transfers. Inside the tower, silence reigned in the executive suite. Colt Merriman was no longer at the head of the table. At 4:37 p.m., the board of directors voted to suspend him indefinitely, pending a full investigation into gross mismanagement and failure to disclose operational vulnerabilities. He left without speaking. Just one final glance at the monitors, each flashing some variation of "access denied." But the most devastating revelation came not from a tech audit. It came from the legal team. At 5:14 p.m., a junior counsel reviewed the architecture documentation file logs, ones they had believed belonged solely to Gentry. One footnote stood out. Copyright C. 2014. Verilyn Systems, LLC. Patent application US 5947 and 33B, filed June 12, 2014. There it was. The entire foundational blueprint of the HERA framework, the layered encryption, the conditional deployment, the behavior-triggered protocols, had been patented over a decade ago under a private LLC wholly owned by Vera Linnell. Gentry didn't just lose the architect. They never owned the house. A call was placed to outside legal advisors. The board fell into stunned silence. The implications were clear. Every version of the system running on Vera's logic since 2014 had been operating on a licensed structure, not a proprietary one, without a valid agreement. Gentry had no legal claim to continue using, modifying, or restoring the code. What's more, by firing her, they'd unknowingly voided their own access privileges under the original license's moral clause. No lawsuits from Vera, no warnings, just structure, just law, just the quiet force of long-prepared truth. The collapse wasn't loud. It wasn't explosive. It was the kind that spread slowly from the inside, like cracks in glass, invisible at first, until the pressure finally breaks it clean apart. And the one name whispered in every hallway, every Slack thread, every late afternoon emergency call: Vera Linnell. The woman they called a relic had built something timeless. By the time Gentry Bancorp's story hit the Sunday headlines, Vera Linnell was already in her garden, trimming the lavender with steady hands. She didn't watch the coverage. She didn't read the financial blogs or listen to the news segments trying to brand her a corporate martyr, a tech rebel, a systems whistleblower. None of those labels felt accurate. She hadn't fought anyone. She hadn't leaked secrets or stood at a podium. She had simply walked away and let the blueprint speak. And in her silence, the world had started listening. Life moved slowly now. She woke with the sun, brewed coffee without checking email, and found joy in ordinary things. The perfect bloom of a white camellia, the sound of wind against cedar, the hum of bees. Her daughter called more often. Old colleagues emailed apologies. But Vera didn't need closure. What she needed, what she'd always wanted, was integrity. And finally, the system she built had honored it. At 9:12 a.m. on a quiet Tuesday, a small package arrived on her porch. No press, no fanfare, just a black envelope and a solid brass plaque inside. Chief Architect, Vera Linnell Systems that protect their makers. Apex Federal Technologies. No contracts, no conditions. Just a message on the back in simple font. We don't need you to save us. We just want to build what you once believed was possible. She held the plaque for a long moment. Not smiling, not weeping, just still. There was no satisfaction in watching Gentry fall, no sense of revenge in their public humiliation, their board resignations, their settlement talks. That part had never mattered. What mattered was that the structure had endured. She had written her truth in logic. She had encoded her values into the system. And when they stripped her title, they'd unknowingly triggered the very lines of code that demanded respect, lines they had never bothered to read. Some saw that as revenge, but Vera didn't. Revenge is reactive, messy, fueled by fire. Her design had been cool, deliberate, and inevitable. It was never about vengeance. It was about defense. It was about building a world where ethics weren't optional, where foundations stood firm even when people didn't. As she mounted the plaque beside the old garden gate, a breeze moved through the trees. She inhaled deeply, the air tinged with rosemary and rain-soaked soil. She didn't miss the boardroom. She didn't miss the power, but sometimes she did miss the silence of servers running exactly as they should. Not for what they did, but for what they stood for, before turning back inside. Vera glanced at the brass plate once more and whispered, I didn't design it to punish them. I designed it to protect the system from people like them. And with that, she walked inside, not to rebuild the past, but to quietly design whatever came next. In a world where quiet strength often goes unnoticed, Vera Linnell's story reminds us that true power doesn't shout. It's built into the foundation. She didn't seek revenge. She stood for principle. And the system she created spoke for her. If her calm resilience and unwavering integrity moved you, don't let this story end here. Leave a comment and share what part resonated with you most. Give this video a like if you believe ethical leadership still matters. And if you want more stories that reveal the quiet courage behind the chaos, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Because sometimes, the most powerful revolutions begin in silence, and you won't want to miss the next one.